So, will voters, that's you, us lot, turn away from the major parties, and how might that impact the result of an election? Let's see what my panel make of this one. David, I'm going to come to you first on this one. You're a very political person, aren't you? Now, the Rochdale by-election, I mean, Galloway romped home. I mean, we know there were issues with the Labour Party, our candidate. He was disowned, basically, wasn't he? But Labour and Conservative were in sight, and Lib Dems were sort of like just disappeared completely. Yeah. So what do you make of what George Galloway's saying? I mean, are our main political parties doomed?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it was glorious what happened in Rochdale. He's given a kicking to both Labour and the fake Conservative Party, as I call them. But you can see with the by-elections over the last 2 or 3 years, the Tory vote has collapsed, even in their own heartlands. But Labour have not done any better. I mean, the number of people voting for Labour has either stayed the same or decreased slightly. So they've been winning elections, by-elections, but that's not because people are, rushing to Labour. It's because they've abandoned the Tories completely, and so they're winning by default. But I think, with someone like George Galloway, he's broken the mould now. So this is the first by-election where someone who is not of the 4 big parliamentary parties, if you include the Lib Dems and Greens in that, have won an election. So this opens the way for challenger parties like my own, the Heritage Party, obviously his Workers' Party, to make a big difference in the general election. So I'm really excited about this myself, and we're gearing up. We want to get into Parliament and make a difference. Yeah.
Very excited. Do you think it's a good thing, Benjamin?
I wouldn't give up the day job just yet, David.
Oh, that's very cutting.
The fact is that George Galloway, first of all, I do not think his election to Parliament is quote-unquote glorious in the slightest. This is an obscene egotist who doesn't care about this country, doesn't care about Rochdale, doesn't, as far as I'm concerned, care about the Muslim communities that have repeatedly elected him. He cares only about himself. This guy, in the last 20 years, has run in 9 constituencies for 6 different political parties, during which he's had 4 wives. This is not a man that cares about helping others. And so I don't care what party or absence of party he stands for. He is not somebody who's in politics for the right reasons. I think if you look at the evidence about what the polls say and about what we've seen in the really very considerable number of by-elections in the last 12 months, you have seen that the Labour Party is polling both in real elections and in the predictions the highest that it has since the mid-90s. In fact, often the polls put them more ahead of the Tories than they were in the mid-90s. So this idea that there's been a divergence from the major parties, I don't think it's happening on the left. There's no evidence of that. I think there's a real danger for the Conservative Party. There was a brilliant piece in the New Statesman about this, the magazine, a couple of weeks ago, about the fact that you've got the Reform Party, according to a GB News poll this week, I think, 5 points behind the Conservative Party. Now, it's never going to translate into parliamentary seats in a substantial way, but I think you're seeing a real fight for the heart of the right and what mainstream right-wing politics looks like, that Reform could really transform the Conservatives after the general election.
David, I mean, it does appear to be both main political parties are tearing themselves apart. They don't need George Galloway to do it for them. They're doing it very successfully themselves. And another recent poll put both Jeremy Corbyn and Boris Johnson are both more popular than the current leaders of the 2 main parties.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at the 2 main parties and the others in Parliament as well, and there's hardly any difference between them, but they're not offering what the majority of people in the country want. I mean, they're woke, they are pushing the climate alarmist agenda, they're dismantling our energy systems, they both pushed for lockdowns and coerced injections, no jab, no job regulations for care home workers, which was absolutely appalling. Now they're pushing for war in Ukraine, more escalation, more money, more weapons to the Zelensky regime, which is very, very unpopular. People have turned away from that. And obviously in Rochdale, there's a big Muslim contingent who are very, very opposed to Tory, Labour together, supporting, the continued military operation in Gaza. So they want a ceasefire. So that's another issue. So all of these issues, you can hardly split Tory, Labour, LibDem, Green on, and the majority of people want a difference.
I mean, that's just complete nonsense.
It's absolute fact.
There's no evidence for that.
Well, George Galloway is the evidence. He just won the seat, isn't he? And
he won a seat.
Parties like mine are putting up a good challenge to the mainstream parties.
He won the seat of Rochdale with a very unusual demographic of electorate, with the Green Party
not 30% Muslim. Rochdale, by the way.
The Green Party not, yeah, which in a first past the post system is clearly enough to win if they choose to vote as a bloc. You had no official Labour Party candidate because Labour dropped them. You had no official Green Party candidate because the guy left the Green Party halfway through the process. It was a completely abnormal set of circumstances with a character that whips up community tensions and tries to divide people. And he's tried it over and over again. You know, the truth is that the Tories are doing really, really badly. But even if you add up the two parties, they are consistently polling between 65 and 70% combined in the polls.
But that's
without
decrease.
Any exception in any poll in the last 18 months, right? So the idea that the country has completely rejected them, the idea the country doesn't support Ukraine or doesn't support military action in the Middle East to support the stability there is for the birds.
That's absolutely not true. What?
I gave evidence. What's your evidence?
Well, the evidence I have is talking to many, many people around the country.
That's not evidence, that's anecdote.
Well, that is, but you put that together and then the vast majority of people that I speak to are against all of these things. They're against climate alarmism, they're against escalation of war in the Ukraine. Well, these things are very, very unpopular. People are abandoning the mainstream parties and the things that you would support, like climate alarmism, for example, and escalation of war in Ukraine. I mean, I don't know what's in your head, but it seems like you support those things. People want an end to this, and they want parties to focus on British people first. Well, we are a new party. We formed in 2020. We've stood in a number of by-elections, and we're going to stand.
Where did you come in those elections?
Well, we didn't come with the best we did was we came fourth in the Hartlepool by-election, so that was a very good result considering that we 400 and something votes. But we came. But so obviously we're a new party. We're a challenger party.
Based on you won 400 votes in your best.
That was in our first election, the first by-election. So we're developing since then. We've got 9 councillors actually at town and parish level. They're doing immensely good. So they're doing great work where they are, challenging the woke narrative, challenging the climate narrative and all of those kind of things, Agenda 2030, challenging that, challenging the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the transgender agenda,
all of your voters
and all of those things. And we've got many, many more voters than maybe you've got people that you go to the pub with.
Look, you're quite entitled to say that that's what you think Britain should look like. But this idea that is what people are calling out for, that people don't want to support Ukrainians being invaded by Russia, that they don't care about the Israelis being killed, that they wanted to die during COVID, these are nonsense. It's not where the country is. And do you know what? I know this is a really unfashionable opinion, but I am proud to be relatively centrist in my politics. I actually think it's an achievement of democracy that you have the two major parties fighting over the people that matter to determine the result of an election with similar views. That says that we're a country that's not as divided as we were in the last decade.
Well, now, you are framing things in a certain way that are very, very unpopular. I mean, what we have in the Middle East is a majority of people do not want more people in Gaza to be slaughtered. The majority of people do not want more
support Hamas on the streets of London.
No, I mean, I support free speech, and most people support free speech. Obviously, I don't support crime, and I've said before, I'm against real criminal activity. But there are all these other issues that we're talking about. Most people do not want a continuation and escalation of the war in Ukraine. We want an end to that war, and we want money to be spent in this country, not on the Zelensky regime. Most people do not want climate alarmism and all the policies that go with this, which are anti-car, which are anti-carbon-based fuels. We want an energy infrastructure that works, that gives us cheap, reliable energy. These kind of things. And the parties in Parliament are all for that. The number of votes they're getting collectively is going down, and this is a fantastic time to challenge a party. No, it is, because in 2019, there were 85% of people voted Tory and Labour. Now, even the polls, if you even agree with them, who knows if they're true or not, because they take a very small sample, are showing 65 to 70%. So the number of votes or voters collectively for those two parties are going down. They will go down further. You've seen their votes collapse in the by-elections. The Tory vote, particularly, has collapsed. And I think you're too beholden to supporting these parties that are destroying our nation. You need to get on board with the Heritage Party.
Do you know what? I can't stand when people claim to be patriotic patriots and then talk about our country having been ruined. Britain is a really great country, and I actually like the fact that we have two main parties which have a lot in common because that's where the voters are. For me, that says we're a country that's not divided. We're a country that is considerably richer, that has considerably less poverty than it did 40 or 50 years ago, though there are still big problems. And I think we're a country that has a lot more in common than we don't. You know, we've just been through a period where we've seen hatred and division reach horrendous levels in the aftermath of the Brexit referendum.
That's nonsense.
I'm not blaming... No, hang on, don't interject. I'm not making an anti-Brexit comment. I'm saying that you've seen people be divided and entrenched, and social media has had a big effect on that. But the fact is that the Labour Party is seeing its highest support in 30 years. The fact is that 2017 general election saw the highest support for the two main political parties in more than a generation. So this idea that the two parties don't represent anybody, that the country is desperate to get rid of them, is nonsense. And we know that because your best ever result, mate, was 400 votes.
Look, we are going to do better. We have councillors, as I say, but, you know, on one hand, you support democracy, but on the other hand, you're saying that, in the aftermath of Brexit was bad because there was hate, there was a narrative of hate afterwards, and I support de-escalation. That's what I support.
I didn't say Brexit was bad.
Don't put words in my mouth.
I didn't say Brexit was bad. I said we've had a horrendous level of division, and actually I think the fact that we've come past that is a good thing. And you might want George Galloway back, but I think he's a disgrace to this country.
Seconds out, round two coming up.